information you give to companies, Google, Facebook, etc., resides in a centralized database, a honeypot for tracking and surveillance of your activities.
The most secure password is longer. So if your password is, "my grandkids are awesome," that is actually way harder to break from a cybersecurity perspective.
We discovered that there were over 250 different facets of our identities that are behavioral, that are trackable, that are uniquely identifiable back to us, and they're usable to get more.
Limiting the amount of information you have online, or just, restricting it so only certain individuals can see it, I think that's a big help.
Within a couple of minutes, I phoned Visa, and they said, yes, $10,000 has been taken.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Marissa Lennox.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Marissa Lennox. Every day, people across Canada fall victim to various scams, losing hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars. It is impossible to keep up with existing scams, and it seems like there is a new one every day. The good news is you don't need to be an expert in scams to know how to protect yourself. Today's show is devoted to arming you with the information you need to fight fraud and keep yourself, your family, and your money safe. But before we dive in, let's tee up the topic.
Financial frauds and scams are on the rise globally, and Canada is not immune. In 2018, the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre received more than 60,000 fraud complaints, up 24% from the previous year. This totaled losses of over $100 million for Canadians, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. According to security experts, less than 5% of all fraud is even reported. Some of the top scams that targeted Canadians last year include wire fraud, investment scams, service scams, and dating and romance scams. But there are hundreds more. Since 2016, nearly 100 Canadians have lost more than $6 million to the bank investigator scam. So be alert and remember, it's okay to hang up, say no, or simply shut your door.
And we live in a world of mass data. There's online communication, there's digital apps, we have smartphones with tracking and surveillance. How has this technology made us more vulnerable, if you will?
Unfortunately, privacy is all about the ability to control your personal information and the way it's used and to whom it's disclosed. That has become a fleeting venture because increasingly the information you give to companies, Google, Facebook, etc., resides in a centralized database, a honeypot for tracking and surveillance of your activities. So increasingly, control of your information is becoming extremely difficult for people to do. And my heart goes out to them because how do you do this? So we're developing ways in which we can increase the possibility of control for people to return, get control back so that they have some semblance of privacy in their lives. I always want to remind people, privacy forms the foundation of our freedom. Without privacy, you're not going to have free and democratic societies. We can't have that.
But I think people have almost just accepted that in joining Facebook and joining these various websites, they're relinquishing that privacy.
If I can just respond to that quickly, let me say no to that, because if you listen to the Facebooks, they were just at CES, this big conference in Vegas, and the chief privacy officer of Facebook says, we give total privacy to our customers, to Facebook, to our clients. We use privacy by design. So we provide privacy. Challenge them on that. Say to them, I want to know how you're protecting my privacy. Never give it up and assume, well, we can't do anything about it. There's always something you can do about it.
What do you say?
I say that any company that says that they're compliant or in support of privacy by design, there's a quick check. Do you have privacy by default or don't you? And it's very easy to find that most organizations, and in fact most websites, make it very difficult for users to go and find those privacy settings and understand what they mean and start pulling levers and pressing buttons to hope to have some control over their personal information, which by that time has already been shared.
So how do scammers then get a hold of that information?
Well, often scammers going on social media and basically mining that information from whatever they can get. So it can be from pictures, any postings that you make. They use that, and then from there, they just build upon that. There's many ways through Google. You can Google someone's name and find a lot of information out there. That's how it starts, basically.
You could potentially find their address, their cell phone number. Where are they coming from? I mean, how many of them are there? And where are they coming from?
Be honest, it's a global problem. The scammers and attacks they can be local, they can be individuals, they can be organized crime groups, but they're coming from all over the globe. And that actually poses a problem when it comes to dealing with it. It's very easy usually to track down who's performing it, but because they're operating out of a jurisdiction that we have no control over or no ability to enforce, they can continue unfettered and without impact. And the internet is global. It's very hard to control how they can access and what they can do from that perspective.
So then, Kevin, Jason, how do you go about an investigation when the fraudster is perpetrating its crime overseas?
If you believe the perpetrators, somewhere else other than Canada, it makes things very difficult for us to investigate.
And what do you do? I mean, what if the funds are going to India or
So
China?
then it just becomes a point of sharing that information with the local law enforcement in that jurisdiction, and then hoping that they continue the investigation to find, are the perpetrators there, and are those accounts, is there any funds or whatnot that can be found and seized and whatnot. But it's very challenging, especially when it's outside of our jurisdiction.
And Ashley, we know how difficult it is to recover losses. I mean, so, how have you supported people in trying to recover some of those funds?
Well, I think that it's really important, if you believe you're a victim of fraud, to what we call triage your case. So look at the details, preserve your documents, talk to somebody, a support person, try to figure out what exactly happened, and then seek out professional help to advise you. Every situation is different, so there are circumstances where if money was transferred outside of the jurisdiction, it becomes increasingly difficult. But you never know until you really get into the investigation, and that's what professionals in the fraud recovery world are there for.
I think the key element that is shared across most exposures and most types of fraud is that what makes the biggest difference is how long it takes you to detect and report it. If you can detect it within an hour or 1 day, it makes a huge difference. Unfortunately, today, so many people find out after 30 days, after 60 days, and they go back to their bank and they say, what's with these charges? And the bank says, well, you didn't come to us early enough. If you'd come to us within 48 hours, for example, we might have been able to put a stop on those payments. So the best tip that we have is to always scrutinize your statements. And now that you've got digital statements, you can pretty much scrutinize them all the time. You don't have to wait for a letter to come in the mail. So the quicker you can catch these things and report them, the better. That is one thing that you have on your side, is time.
All right, well, when we come back, a victim shares her cautionary tale. That's next.
I phoned Rogers and my carrier, and they said that I wouldn't have service because I had canceled my service in the afternoon. And I said I didn't cancel my service. And they said, no, you called at 4 and you canceled the service.
Welcome back. My next guest was scammed out of close to $10,000 after falling victim to a SIM swapping scheme that Ontario police warn could empty your bank accounts. Sheila O'Reilly joins me now to share her story. Thank you for being here. So take us back to the beginning. What happened?
I was out and I turned my phone off for just an hour. When I came home, I didn't have service, and I waited quite a while and checked everything, everyone else in the house had service. I phoned Rogers and my carrier, and they said that I wouldn't have service because I had canceled my service in the afternoon. And I said, I didn't cancel my service. And they said, no, you called at 4 and you canceled the service and had your phone ported to another, from our, and I did say, no, I didn't.
Did they believe you? Did they think that maybe someone could have pretended to be you earlier in the day? Were they willing to work with you in that point?
At that point, they, it took them a couple of minutes, but because it's documented, they did go through and they said, oh, I'm sorry, just a moment. It says here that customers' date of birth is different than person on the phone. So actually,
so the person didn't even have the right information, and they still were able to port it. So once the number was ported, then what happened?
I was told that the number was ported and it was no longer part of the of my carrier, and they put me through to fraud immediately. So by this point, it's 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, and so that was. The information was filed, and it occurred to me that I should start phoning Visa. And so within a couple of minutes, I phoned Visa, and they said, yes, $10,000 has been taken. I think what I'm understanding is that the fraudsters have actually purchased cell phones and they've attached my number to it, so it's sort of it's out there.
And through that, they were able to access your bank account information.
Right. So then they can access everything from your SIM card. So that's again where the SIM swap is coming from. They're able to access the information, and they will go through apps to see if I have
that's right, because
my bank accounts.
It wasn't just your bank account, but then your Gmail went down, your Facebook went
down, and my Messenger, and everything that was. So it's a constant sort of catch up. I keep thinking of it as a spider web, sort of, that if, you have to be pretty diligent thinking, okay, well, if they've got this, then maybe they could, go to here and get that. So
how did this happen?
As I said before, this isn't anything that I did. However, if I were to back it up and say, my passwords were pretty similar, and I did get a little bit lazy. Now I've redone all of my passwords, and we have to go old school. We have to have a book that has the passwords in it, the date you put it in, keep it in pencils, so and hide it somewhere in your house, because these people are in a basement in a sweater vest somewhere. They're not in your house, which is good.
But even when the individual called Rogers to have the number ported, they knew certain information about you.
Well, unfortunately, the information that they had, as we were just talking about, it's attainable. I mean, the phone book would give, if we had. The date of birth was interesting because that was, and again, that becomes point of entry issue, that we have to go right back to the beginning of how are you training the people who work, or is there something going on that we're not really aware of?
Well, and that would seem like a major red flag.
Right.
If someone can't remember their own birthday, you would think that
gives you a wrong
the
birthday.
customer service individual at Rogers would know.
But if you imagine that you have a 19 or a 21-year-old person at the other end, and somebody impersonating me calls and says, I don't like the service I'm getting, and they start bullying that person on the other end, that could, again, be an easy port of entry for them to say, all right, I'll,
Fair enough.
But that's not
and
acceptable.
These people,
I mean, I'm not saying that that's okay. It's how it happened.
So what kind of toll did this take on you? I mean, how did it make you feel when it happened?
It's just miserable. It's a lot of work, and it's frustrating. And that's me. Everybody will handle it differently. This could crumple people if they had no idea where to turn, if they didn't have people to help them, if they didn't, know how to work through it. It would be devastating.
It could have been much worse.
Definitely.
And I'm glad that you were able to recover your
you.
losses. Thank you for coming
Thanks
on
so
to
much.
share your story.
Thanks for
When we
having
come
me.
back, what other scams to watch out for? That's next.
These hackers are smart. Often they lay low until the story goes away, and a year or two later, they act on the data.
Welcome Welcome back. From romance scams to identity fraud, scammers have endlessly evolving ways to trick their targets. And there never seems to be an end to the stream of scams being devised. However, there are some common scams to keep your eye on. Now, we just heard Sheila's story about the SIM swapping scam. What are some of the ways that people are vulnerable to this type of scam?
Well, I think it's important for people to understand that anytime they share any facet of their information, that can be used as a lever to get more information. So just by sharing your phone number can end up in a form on any website or in a business or discarded in a garbage can. That phone number can be used to check to see which carrier you're with and call that carrier and to attempt a SIM swapping type of fraud, which is one of the most invasive types of fraud that I think we'll agree we have because of the intimacy that we share with our phones.
There's actually software products out there called password managers that you can that'll work on your cell phones, that'll work on your computers, and it allows you to, every time you go to a new site and you sign up, it will generate a complex, long password that's very secure and store it for you. You don't need to remember it because you just remember the one password to get into the vault. It creates a vault of these passwords. So every website you go to, everything has a separate password. It makes it very easy to manage. And it makes it also one of the tricks with passwords is the length is very important. Shorter ones seem to be really easy to remember because we're thinking of passwords as being, you have to have different letters, uppercase, lowercase, special characters, and all those things. In actual case, the most secure password is longer. So if your password is, my grandkids are awesome, that is actually way harder to break from a cybersecurity perspective than an 8-character password that's just random characters. And it's really easy to remember that passphrase over a password. And most websites now will support up to 256 characters. So you can create a passphrase that's really easy to remember.
But there are other scams that don't involve passwords. So I'm thinking of a story in Etobicoke recently. The victim received a call on their landline from a person saying that they were from a bank, and then they told that individual to well, we need to be aware of scams, so what I'd like you to do is go on the back of your bank card and call the number on the back of your bank card and contact your bank because there's nefarious activity happening and you need to get involved. And so what the individual did was they hung up, they called the number on the back of the bank card, and they were redirected somehow, or maybe the scammer intercepted somehow that phone call, and they ended up back on the line with the scammer. And long story short, all of their money was taken out and moved into a cryptocurrency account. How does that happen?
When they receive a call and they are asked to hang up and dial a different phone number, there's a trick that turns out to essentially not hang up on the caller. So as you pick up the phone immediately to redial the phone number that you think is real, you're actually still connected to the original caller, and they pretend to be someone else. So there's 2 or 3 working in tandem, so they just put someone else on the line saying, hello, this is so-and-so. So that landline, the reason that's a landline specific type of fraud is because sometimes landlines don't hang up right away. So they're playing on that gap of 5, 6 seconds, however many it is, and they're insisting that the person hang up right away and call the number immediately. So they typically ask them to be holding on to the card and then hang up and then pick up again.
And in the end, they ended up transferring $33,000 to a cryptocurrency. Now, the other day, we also learned of a breach at a Life Labs. Anne, tell us about that.
What is so outrageous to me is that companies, major companies, and Life Labs, they're in the business of doing all kinds of testing on health-related data, medical data. The medical data, health-related data, is the most sensitive personal information that exists. So a company like Life Labs that does all this testing, you would think they would have the strongest security possible. Obviously, they didn't. It was a breach involving 15 million Canadians' personal information. Test results from Life Labs, 15 million accounts in Ontario and British Columbia. And the CEO was interviewed that day about the breach, and someone asked him, were the data encrypted? And he said, I don't know, which means it couldn't have been encrypted. They would have told him. And this is what drives me crazy. You see, they're in the business of analyzing results of health data, sending it back to the physician who requested it, fine. Then the data sits there. It doesn't go away. They don't delete the data. It remains in the database. I always tell everyone, if you have data that's called data at rest, for God's sakes, encrypt the data. So at least it's strongly protected and it doesn't act as a magnet for the bad guys, the hackers.
What do hackers want with medical information?
There's so much they can do with it. They can perpetrate identity theft. They can do all kinds of things with your information. And what does Life Labs do? They say, yeah, we're really sorry about this. We're going to give victims of this data breach a year of protection in terms of identity theft. Well, excuse me, a year is nothing because these hackers are smart. Often they lay low until the story goes away, and a year or two later, they act on the data. You're not protected at all.
They use it for a technique called social engineering. And so once they have this pieces of information, they can use it to gain credibility when they call you on the phone because they know information that maybe only your doctor should know or maybe only your financial institution should know. And so it makes them seem more legit. And that's why you say, okay, and you participate in what they're asking you to do. So it may not seem why they would steal the data because they're not going to selling the health data isn't all that useful from a financial perspective, but it is very useful if you want to try and pretend to be someone who you should be interacting with.
Unbelievable. All right, well, coming up, how thieves are using high-tech gadgets to steal your cars and what you can do to protect yourself. That's next.
So these are also known as relay theft, and also I know officers use the word car hopping. This is when the suspects utilize computers and other technologies in order to steal the transmission from these fobs that normally start the vehicle, unlock the vehicle.
Over the years, advances in technology have helped keep our cars safe and out of reach from criminals. But recent reports show vehicles that utilize one of these are becoming more and more popular amongst thieves.
So these are also known as relay theft, and also I know officers use the word car hopping. This is when the suspects utilize computers and other technologies in order to steal the transmission from these fobs that normally start the vehicle, unlock the vehicle, and they're able to amplify the fob transmission, and they duplicate it into either a stolen fob or another fob that they may have. With that signal can now be used to unlock the vehicle and to start that vehicle up as well. Well, there are some safety tips that we do offer, some things that you can use to protect yourself. Parking your vehicle within a garage, but also, you know, when you get home, you don't want to just throw your fob keys right at the entrance of the your doorway, because this is how they're accessing the fob signals. Or also even placing them within a protective pouch protects the fobs from getting your transmission stolen from these suspects.
More and more these days we're getting calls from people about what's known as relay theft. This is where we come in with certain devices like GPS trackers, where the second the vehicle moves or is started, the customer gets notified via either text or email or even an automated phone call. Many manufacturers offer GPS tracking already built into the vehicle. The downside with that is every vehicle within a model range will have their tracking either antenna or system in the exact same place every time. That's just how production lines work. We have the luxury of putting these things anywhere in the vehicle. You know, we can dismantle half the dash, the radio, behind the glove box, under the seat. There really is no set place where they can go. Our units have a battery life that'll allow them to be tracked whether the vehicle has been disconnected from its power source or not. So as Rachel's stealing the car, our CloudHawk app is going to notify us that there's been movement detected. It's going to send us a text message as well as an automated phone call letting us know that the vehicle has been detected in motion.
CloudHawk update. Your tracker, DC Unlimited, has moved around 8 filter record.
And there you go. That's how it works. Within seconds, you know your vehicle's moving, and then you can take action.
For more information on how to protect yourself from e-car or relay thefts, visit drps.ca. Here in Durham Region, Sean Stante, Zoomer News.
Thanks, Sean. Anecdotally, David Beckham lost 3 Ferraris because of this. I can't confirm whether that's true, but that's been the rumor. Now, knowing what to be on the lookout for when it comes to scams is one of the best ways to protect yourself. And the next step is knowing how to protect yourself. So what general advice do you have for our audience when it comes to keeping themselves, their families, their money, their identity safe?
So my big piece of advice, like I said earlier, is to think of your own identity as something that you want to keep private to yourself, and anything that you share online needs to be just that little bit different. And the reason we're harping on this is because there are so many websites that keep on asking you to log in with Google, log in with Facebook, trying to aggregate that personal information so that they uniquely know you. The internet wants to uniquely know who you are. And that means so many different websites and companies have all these facets of personal information. So we recently did a research study at the university, UOIT, and we discovered that there were over 250 different facets of our identities that are behavioral, that are trackable, that are uniquely identifiable back to us, and they're usable to get more, right? Because you can just call your doctor's office and pretend that you forgot one piece of information. But what is even more interesting is that eventually we're going to run out of identities. I mean, everyone's going to get breached. Everyone's identities are going to be out there. So what will criminals do? They just create synthetic identities. And then synthetic identities are created by mixing identity elements from multiple real identities to create an individual who does not exist, who does not get credit alerts, who can apply for a credit card, and you can apply for hundreds of credit cards, and of course fraudsters will eventually do this. They'll keep feeding these cards and eventually bust out by maxing out their credit line. So identity theft is not just limited to real people, it's also the potential for creating almost unlimited synthetic identities.
I think I agree with what a lot of everybody is saying here. Being aware of how much information you put online, to echo what Stuart was saying with the social engineering, that's essentially what these fraudsters are doing. So they're going online, they're looking at your social media, seeing how much information they can grab, and then they're calling these different services to try to get into your account. So, you know, limiting the amount of information you have online, or just, you know, restricting it so only certain individuals can see it, I think that's a big help. And then, again, putting two-factor authentication on your accounts is another way you can help protect yourself from, you know, fraudsters actually getting at opening up or into your information.
Unfortunately, in Canada, we don't have credit freezes, and that's something that's available from the same companies, TransUnion and Equifax, down south of the border.
You can't freeze a credit?
Americans have credit freezes available to them that ensures that no one opens accounts and you're always notified. But here in Canada, Canadians don't benefit from that. You can put a credit alert, but it's not the same thing. So that is one of the pieces of legislation that needs to change ASAP, because as the Equifax breach showed, this is an important way that individuals can control their identities and their privacy. So back to that point around control.
Okay, you raise a good point, because it seems, you know, we wonder, what is the government doing about this? It seems like all they're doing is mounting awareness campaigns, but is there something that they could be doing to better protect Canadians?
There's a lot they could do. Our Federal Privacy Commissioner of Canada, Daniel Terrien, for the past 3 years has gone to the Liberal government seeking to update PIPEDA. It's the Personal Information and Electronic Documents Act. It's a private sector privacy law. It's old. It was dated in the early 2000s. It desperately needs to be updated. And he, the commissioner, needs to be given some real power, some authority as to what he could do. When I was privacy commissioner, I had order-making power at a provincial level. He doesn't have that. Did Trudeau do anything for the past 3 years? No, he didn't do anything to update the federal privacy sector law. This is what we have to move on. Now that it's a minority government and the commissioner has once again gone to the federal government and seeking these changes, the Conservatives have supported Commissioner Terrien, and now they're about to engage in some updates, finally.
How about our investment accounts? How exposed are they? RSPs, TFSA?
I think they're probably just as exposed as any of other records. And it's not about the record itself, it's more about the credentials that are used to access those accounts. So criminals are not breaking directly in using fancy hacking techniques. They're getting hold of your email address or your username, and they're getting hold of your password, and they're logging in as you, and then they're executing transactions as you. From the bank's perspective, it looks like it's you doing the transaction. That's part of the identity theft and the fraud. They're pretending to be you. Unless it's completely out of normal, and banks in particular are investing a lot of money in artificial intelligence technologies that are being able to understand what kind of transactions have you done in the past. So does this one make sense, and identify it as fraud before it actually happens. And they're doing a lot of investment there trying to protect against that, because the fraudsters know what the limits are at organizations or within organizations. So they know exactly how far they can go. So the transaction they go at $10,000 is right below the limit where the insurance that the bank has doesn't pay out. So they know they can do it because the bank's just going to go, we'll pay the insurance, we'll give the money back, we'll do whatever it needs to do, and they get away with it. If they go higher than that amount, they run into problems, they start getting investigations and those capabilities. So they know the rules, and part of that challenge, so once again, protecting your identity information. I think you're right, Pippa, it does need to be updated because it covers about 10 or 20 different identifying elements as personal identifiable information. And as you said, there's 200 different things that can create an identity. Yes. And so it needs to be updated to do that, because this information helps them get access to that, to pretend to be you.
All right, well, when we come back, we'll take questions from the audience. That's next.
Somebody out there has all my personal information, and I just don't know how to protect myself properly.
Welcome back. It's that time in the show when we take questions from the audience. Welcome to the round table. What's your name and your question?
My name is Robert McGowan, and my question is fraud prevention ultimately the responsibility of the consumer?
Not in this day and age. There are measures that the consumer can engage in. We've been discussing some of those measures, but you have to ensure that whoever you're dealing with, the company, the government agency, they have to have some very strong security measures that they are undertaking, because I just simply don't think it's possible for the consumer to have all the responsibility placed on them in this day and age where there's so many measures, like we were talking about PayPal and the strength of PayPal as opposed to using some other service. We have to have expectations on the part of whoever's delivering the services to us as well.
And I think I can add, in the civil fraud recovery world, which is pursuing a fraudster on the basis of fraud in the civil courts versus the criminal courts, negligence on the part of the victim is actually not a defense to fraud. So if you are able to pursue your case in the civil court, the fraudster cannot come back and say, oh, they were, too easy with their passwords, or they were, negligent in some other way. They didn't do enough due diligence on themselves before providing me money. That's not a defense to fraud in the civil courts. So there are options to help you in that respect as well. It's not all on the consumer.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the roundtable. What's your name and what's your question?
My name is Ursula. My case is very similar to the lady you interviewed before. I think her name was Sheila.
Sheila.
Just not to the same magnitude. I'm a poor pensioner. I've closed my Facebook account more than a year ago. I don't do social media. I don't have a smartphone. I just use a cell phone for family and friends and text messages, and that's pretty much it. I don't understand how the SIM card in my telephone can be used to access my bank account and my Visa account, which they were. When I noticed my cell phone number was also stolen, I called Virgin Mobile and alerted them. And they said they would investigate, but I've had very little support from them, actually. They told me my number was transferred to TELUS, and I should take it up with TELUS. So I contacted TELUS, who never got back to me. Right now, I'd like to know if any of this gets reported to the police by the financial institution or by the cell phone company. Should I be reporting it? Do they really care? I mean, there's hundreds of thousands of cases like mine. Do they really care about one little old pensioner?
So this is happening right now?
Yes. And right now I feel vulnerable and kind of left adrift because somebody out there has all my personal information and I just don't know how to protect myself properly.
Okay, so if I can offer two things, call the police and file an occurrence report. There's no guarantee it's going to do something, but it can help. And I will put you in touch with the chief data trust privacy officer at TELUS, who I assure you will help you.
And so just to echo what Anne was saying there, quite often the institutions don't notify us when a particular person has been victimized unless they've been victimized or taken advantage of. Then that's the institution I'm talking about. So just to echo what my partner was saying on the due diligence part, no matter how small the fraud is, I would contact your local law enforcement and report that. Because oftentimes what we do is a one-off case might be extremely hard for us to tackle, but if we have multiple people calling in about the same type of offense and giving us the same type of information, then we can lump that all together into a bigger investigation and then hopefully resolve the issue. But I would for sure report that, like Anne said, to your local law enforcement.
I worked in the financial sector for 35 years and I'm not stupid.
Of course not.
Try to protect myself and I don't give information willingly or happily to strangers, but just the fact that somebody is out there walking around being me, it just unnerves me because I do live with a disability. I like to do my banking online. I've looked after all that. I've changed it and I've had a second step in my access, my online access. Yep. I do it only from my home computer. I don't do anything, like I don't have a smartphone, so I don't do it outside in any other Wi-Fi area. I mean, I'm old, but I'm not
It
really
sounds
stupid.
like you're doing all the right things, and it's it's very unfortunate that someone's taken advantage of you that way. But you are doing the right things. It's nothing, no mistake you've made. Be confident from what you've been describing. You're doing all of the same things that I would recommend.
Okay, thank you for sharing your story.
And if you give me your email, I promise I'll put you in touch with TELUS. I promise.
When we come back, final thoughts from our panelists. That's next.
In a previous episode of theZoomer, we discussed happiness. On Facebook, Justin writes, "Happiness shouldn't be hard to find. There are a lot of people out there saying how they are unhappy. Find something that makes you happy and put all of your effort into it." In another episode, we spoke about marketing trends. Edna emailed us about the show. She writes, "One of your audience members stated that there weren't enough seniors packages in terms of housing. However, seniors have a lot of breaks and discounts in other areas, like restaurants and other businesses that offer seniors discounts. I am careful how I spend my money and what I spend it on. I do feel there should be packaging for people in all age groups who are truly in need." Keep the comments coming in and connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and via email at rsvp@zoomermedia.ca. Don't forget, for free tickets to the show, go to www.universe.com and search Zoomer Media and log on to www.thezoomertv.com for full episodes and more.
Welcome back to the Zoomer. It's time for final thoughts from our panelists, starting to my left. Anne.
Thank you. I just want to urge you to protect your privacy and know how important it is, and also beware of facial recognition. Cameras are picking up your facial images, comparing it to others, and identifying you as potentially the bad guy. The rate of false positives, inaccurate results, are extremely high, in excess of 80%. Beware of this.
I'm going to say it again. The idea of passwords are still a relevant thing that need to be used to protect your privacy, and moving to the passphrase concept, which is longer, it's easier for us to remember and harder for the criminals to break, and it's a simple thing that we can do.
If you're contacted by somebody who you don't know or recognize and they're asking you for personal information, you might be pressured into giving that information. Take a step, take a breath, and you know, call for a friend, and you know, don't be quick to respond to that fraudulent request.
I think we often forget about the psychological aspect. So I would say, if you're a victim, please don't be embarrassed of what you're going through. It's really important to report it to the police.
Yes, and I agree with that. And not only the police, I think if you think you're a victim of fraud or you have been a victim of fraud, take into account that there are many options available to you, whether that be through professional regulators, whether that be through the civil fraud recovery world, or our friends at the police. So I think you should be open to all possibilities, you know, when you find yourself in that situation.
And I want to thank the audience members that came and asked questions, because it, if anything, it illustrated the fact that even though you are sharp and you're aware and you understand a lot of the facets of self-protection, this can and will happen to all of us. It's happened to me a number of times. It's going to happen more and more. And it's important to realize that privacy is not secrecy, so don't keep it to yourself. Share your stories, make sure you report them, because as the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre said, fewer than 5% of people actually come through with this, and embarrassment is a major factor. Don't be embarrassed. Share it. We need that kind of visibility.
And I would just add, it's okay to be rude. Hang up, slam the door, it's okay. Thank you for being with us. We'll see you soon. It's time to zoom out.